For almost 20 years, Peter Lindberg had pulled more secrets out of the ocean floor than almost any living man. Sunken warships, lost cargo, century-old shipwrecks stuffed with champagne that still had bubbles in it. This is a man who has spent his whole life staring at sonar screens, and there is almost nothing down there that can surprise him anymore. So when a world-renowned sea explorer like that goes quiet, when he stops giving interviews and starts choosing his words very carefully, you should probably lean in and listen, because something down there finally got to him. And here is the thing he finally admitted. After years of being laughed at, after scientists called him a fraud and a treasure hunter chasing headlines, Lindberg and his diving partner went back on record about the object they found 90 meters below the surface of the Baltic Sea. A perfectly round, 60-meter wide disc, sitting at the end of a long scar in the seabed that looks for all the world like something heavy skidded to a stop down there. And what they revealed about it does not sound like geology. It does not sound natural at all. There really is something hiding beneath the Baltic Sea. A team of professional divers really did go down to touch it. Their equipment really did stop working when they got close. And by the end of this video, you are going to hear exactly what the man who found it believes is down there, in his own words, including the one detail he kept to himself for years because he was afraid of what people would say. But to understand why this thing has haunted him for over a decade, you have to go back to the summer it first appeared on a screen, as nothing more than a blurry smudge that everyone on the boat almost ignored. In June of 2011, a Swedish diving crew called Ocean X was doing what they had done for years. They were treasure hunting. Peter Lindberg and his partner Dennis Osberg were not scientists, and they were not UFO chasers. They were salvage men. Their whole business model was finding old shipwrecks in the cold, dark waters between Sweden and Finland and pulling valuable cargo back up to the surface. On this particular trip, they were searching the Gulf of Bothnia, the northern arm of the Baltic Sea, hoping to find an old vessel rumored to be carrying crates of vintage liquor. Boring, profitable, ordinary work. They were dragging their sonar equipment back and forth across the seafloor, scanning for the telltale shape of a sunken ship. And then the screen showed them something that was very much not a ship. At first, they almost wrote it off. The image was grainy, low resolution, the kind of blurry blob that experienced sonar operators learn to ignore. But this blob had a shape to it. A clean, circular outline, far too round and far too regular to be a pile of rocks. Lindberg himself would later describe it as blurry, but interesting. And then they noticed the detail that made the whole crew go silent. Trailing away from this perfect circle was a long, straight track gouged into the seabed. A track that ran for something like 300 meters before it reached the object. As if whatever this thing was had come in at a low angle, dragged along the bottom of the sea, and ground to a halt right there. Now pause for a second and put yourself on that boat. You came out here to find a shipwreck full of old wine. Instead, 90 meters beneath your hull, your sonar is showing you a 60-meter disc sitting at the end of what looks unmistakably like a skid mark, a landing strip. Your first instinct is that the machine is broken. Your second instinct, the one you do not want to say out loud in front of the crew, is that this looks exactly like the thing every kid has drawn at least once in their life. It looks like a flying saucer that crashed. And that is where the trouble started, because the moment that thought enters your head, it is almost impossible to get it back out. For months, the image circulated quietly. Then it leaked to the press, and the world lost its mind. Newspapers ran it on the front page. People started calling it the Millennium Falcon, because the shape really did look like the famous spaceship from Star Wars, right down to a notch cut out of one side. And in all the noise, one question kept rising to the top. What is it actually made of, and what is it actually doing down there? Lindberg, to his credit, kept saying the responsible thing. He kept saying he did not know, that it could be a natural formation, that people needed to calm down. But privately, the questions were already piling up faster than anyone could answer them. And I will tell you about the one question he refused to answer in public for years, but not yet. First, there are riddles we have to walk through ourselves. So let's do exactly that. How were they able to even get down there? The Baltic Sea is not a friendly place to dive. We are talking about 90 meters of cold, dark, low-visibility water, which is deep enough that you cannot simply swim down on a single breath of air and have a look around. At that depth, your body is under enormous pressure. The light from the surface barely reaches you. A single mistake with your gas mixture can kill you. This is technical diving, the serious kind, the kind that requires special training and special equipment and a very calm head. So Ocean X assembled a team of professional divers and went back. Among them was a man named Stefan Hogerborn, a diver with more than 6,000 dives behind him across a 20-year career. This is not someone who scares easily. This is someone who has seen the inside of more wrecks and reefs and underwater caves than almost anyone alive. Keep that in mind, because what this man said after he came back up is going to matter a great deal later. They descended into the gloom, following the line down toward the shape their sonar had drawn for them. And the closer they got, the stranger things became. The first riddle: the equipment that refused to work. Here is the detail that turned a curiosity into something genuinely unsettling. According to the divers, as they approached the object, their equipment started to fail. Stefan Hogerborn reported that anything electric stopped working when they got within about 200 meters of the thing. Their satellite phone, which had functioned perfectly everywhere else, went dead the moment they were directly above the object, and came back to life the moment they moved away. Cameras and other electronics behaved the same way. Now think about how strange that is. You can explain away a single faulty gadget. Salt water gets into things, cold drains batteries, pressure does odd stuff to electronics. But the divers described a consistent pattern. Get close to the object, your gear dies. Move away from the object, your gear works. That is not how a random equipment failure behaves. That is how interference behaves. The kind of thing you would expect if there were some kind of field or some kind of material down there actively disrupting electronics. And the obvious, uncomfortable question is, what could possibly be sitting on the floor of the Baltic Sea, supposedly for thousands of years, that still has the power to kill a satellite phone the instant you float above it? The second riddle: it does not look like a rock. When the divers finally reached the object and got close enough to see it with their own eyes, the descriptions they brought back only made things worse. This was not a smooth flying saucer like the sonar suggested. Up close, it looked more like a giant mushroom, rising several meters off the seabed, sitting on top of something that looked disturbingly like a pillar or a stem holding it up off the bottom. And the surface of it was not the rough, random texture of natural stone. The divers described it as smooth in places, almost concrete-like, hard, with strange features carved into it. They reported seeing straight lines and right angles. They reported what looked like corridors. They reported an egg-shaped opening on the top, like an entrance leading down into the object. And then there were the stone formations sitting on top of it, arranged in odd circles that, in the divers' own words, looked almost like small fireplaces. Straight lines, right angles, smooth surfaces, a possible entrance. We will come back to whether nature can make these things, because nature absolutely can make some of them. But hold the image in your head, because it gets stranger still. The third riddle: the stones that look burnt. This is the part that stuck with Stefan Hogerborn, the veteran of 6,000 dives. The stones arranged in those circle formations on top of the object were covered in something that looked like soot. They looked blackened. They looked burnt. Some of the material around the cracks of the structure looked, in the diver's description, like melted stone, almost like lava that had oozed out and hardened. And Hogerborn said something about it that I think about a lot. He said, "Normally stones don't burn." This is a man with 2 decades of underwater experience telling you that he came back up from this dive with more questions than he had going down, and that in all his thousands of dives, he had never seen anything like it. When the most experienced person in the room is the one who looks the most rattled, that tells you something. Whatever made those stones look burnt, 90 meters underwater where there is no oxygen to sustain a fire, is not an everyday occurrence. So now stack the riddles up. A perfectly circular object, a 300-meter skid track behind it, electronics that die when you get close, smooth surfaces and right angles, and a possible entrance, and stones that look like they have been through a fire at the bottom of the sea. Any one of these on its own, you could shrug off. All of them together, in one place, is a lot harder to explain away. The riddle that comes back to haunt everyone, the records. And now we arrive at the thing that should bother you the most, the same way it has bothered investigators from the very beginning. If this object is artificial, if somebody built it or sent it or sank it, then where is the paper trail? Where is the story? The Baltic Sea is one of the most fought over, most heavily trafficked, most thoroughly mapped bodies of water on the planet. Vikings sailed it. Empires fought naval wars across it for centuries. In the 20th century alone, both world wars saw enormous military activity in these exact waters. Submarines, mines, secret weapons programs, the whole catalog. The countries around the Baltic have kept detailed naval and military records for a very, very long time. And yet, there is no record of anyone building or losing a 60-meter circular structure on the floor of the Gulf of Bothnia. No logbook entry, no salvage report, no declassified weapons project. No old fisherman's legend about a cursed patch of water where the compasses spin. Nothing. For an object this size, sitting in waters this well documented, the total silence in the historical record is genuinely bizarre. It is almost as if, whatever it is, nobody from history knew it was there to write it down in the first place. Hold on to that idea. It is going to matter when we reach the end. And of course, the riddle of the track. We keep coming back to it because it is the single hardest feature to explain. That 300-meter scar running along the seabed up to the object. If this were just a lump of rock dropped by a glacier, it would not have a long, straight runway behind it. Rocks do not slide into position, leaving a clean trail. But a heavy object moving horizontally, hitting the bottom and skidding to a stop, would leave exactly that kind of mark. To a lot of people, that track is the smoking gun. It does not look like something that was always there. It looks like something that arrived. So we have a circular object, 90 meters down, with a landing track behind it, that kills electronics, that has straight edges and a possible doorway, covered in stones that look burnt, with not one word about it anywhere in recorded history. The experts came, the cameras came, the headlines came, and the Baltic Sea anomaly answered none of it. It just sat there, asking more questions than anyone could answer. Which brings us, naturally, to the theories. The Baltic Sea anomaly is the kind of mystery that breeds theories the way still water breeds mosquitoes. There are dozens of them, some completely unhinged, some surprisingly reasonable. For the sake of time, we are going to focus on the 5 that actually matter, the ones that serious people have either argued for or argued against. And we are going to save the most important one, the one our world-renowned explorer himself eventually landed on, for the very end. So let's get into it. Theory 1. A crashed extraterrestrial craft. This is the big one. The theory the whole internet jumped to the second that sonar image leaked. And honestly, you can see why. Picture the evidence the way a believer sees it. You have a disk. Not a rough circle, a disk. The single most iconic shape in the entire history of UFO sightings. You have a 300-meter track behind it. Exactly what you would expect if a damaged craft came in at a shallow angle and skidded across the seabed before stopping. You have electronics that fail in the object's presence, which fits perfectly with decades of reports from pilots and witnesses who claim their instruments go haywire near unidentified craft. And you have stones that look scorched, as if something came down hot. For people who believe, this is almost too clean. It is not a vague blob you have to squint at. It is a flying saucer shape with a crash trail that disables technology covered in burn marks at the bottom of a sea where nobody recorded it arriving. If a UFO crashed into the ocean thousands of years ago and sank to the bottom, this is more or less exactly what we would expect to find. And it would explain the missing records beautifully, because of course there is no human logbook entry for a vehicle that was never human in the first place. Theory 2. A Nazi anti-submarine device from the Third Reich. This one is less famous, but to a lot of investigators, more chilling, precisely because it is so plausible. During the Second World War, the Baltic Sea was a battleground, and Nazi Germany was pouring resources into experimental technology that, frankly, sounds like science fiction even today. So, one theory holds that the anomaly is a man-made wartime device, possibly a structure built to interfere with Allied submarine navigation, or to jam radar and radio signals passing through the area. And here is why it is so seductive. It would explain the one detail that the alien theory can only hand-wave at, which is the electronics failure. If this were a device specifically designed to disrupt electronic and radio equipment, then of course it would still scramble a satellite phone today. That is the whole point of it. A giant steel and concrete jamming installation, sunk and forgotten after the war, would be a structure with straight lines and right angles, sitting in waters where, conveniently, a lot of wartime records were destroyed or hidden. For people who find aliens a bridge too far, this is the theory that lets them keep almost all of the spookiness while staying inside the laws of physics. Theory 3. The ruins of a pre-Ice Age civilization. Now we go in the other direction, deep into the past. This theory says forget aliens and forget the Nazis. What if the anomaly is far, far older than either, a piece of a sunken civilization that existed before the last Ice Age? Here is the logic, and it is not as crazy as it first sounds. We know for a fact that sea levels were dramatically lower during the last ice age. Huge areas that are underwater today were once dry, walkable land where people could and did live. The floor of the Baltic, in this theory, was once a coastline or a plain, and the anomaly was a structure built on it, a temple, a monument, a foundation. Then the ice melted, the waters rose, and an entire chapter of human history was swallowed and erased. This would explain the right angles and the smooth, worked surfaces, because they would be the remains of architecture. And it would explain the missing records perfectly, because the people who built it had no writing that survived, and everyone who remembered it drowned with their world. It is basically an Atlantis theory, but with real, accepted geology underneath it. Theory 4. A portal or gateway. I will be honest with you, this is the most outlandish theory on the list, and I am including it because it genuinely has a following. The idea is that the anomaly is not a vehicle, and not a building but a doorway, some kind of portal to another place or another dimension. The argument leans entirely on the electronics failure. The thinking goes that if there were some kind of opening in space, or some intense energy source down there, it would generate exactly the kind of field that scrambles every piece of equipment that comes near it. The egg-shaped opening on the top gets folded into this too, treated not as a hatch but as a literal threshold. There is, to be clear, essentially no hard evidence for this one, but it survives because it does what the believer's mind wants a theory to do. It takes the single most unexplained feature, the dead electronics, and makes it the centerpiece instead of an inconvenience. Theory 5. A completely natural glacial formation. And now, the theory the scientists actually believe. This is the boring answer, the deflating answer, and we are going to give it its full, fair hearing, because it is also the strongest answer on this list, and you deserve to hear why. The scientific position is that the Baltic Sea anomaly is a natural geological formation, specifically the kind of debris left behind by glaciers. Dr. Volker Bruckert, a marine geologist at Stockholm University, actually analyzed physical rock samples taken from the site, and what he found was not alien metal or worked concrete. He found granite, gneiss, and sandstone, ordinary rocks, the exact kinds of stone you would expect glaciers to pick up, carry, and dump as they advanced and retreated across the region. He noted that one large sample looked like volcanic rock, which led him to suggest the formation could have been shaped by glacial movement or even an ancient submarine volcano well over 100,000 years ago. In this reading, every single spooky feature has a dull explanation. The circular shape is a coincidence of how the debris settled, made to look cleaner than it is by a low-resolution sonar scan. The track behind it is a groove carved by a moving glacier or a chunk of dragged ice. The right angles are the natural fracture lines of granite, which really does break along surprisingly straight planes. The whole thing is just a pile of rocks, and our pattern-hungry brains did the rest. That is the mainstream consensus, and it would be easy to stop the video right here and call it solved. But not so fast, because every one of these theories, including the scientific one, has a fatal flaw. And before our explorer can tell you what he really thinks, we have to walk through them and watch each one fall apart. Let's do this the honest way, and take them down one at a time, including the ones we might want to believe. Start with the crashed UFO, the fan favorite. The biggest problem is the material. When Bruckert analyzed actual samples, they came back as ordinary earthly rock, granite and sandstone. Not exotic alloys, not anything that screams built somewhere other than Earth. If this were the metal hull of a crashed craft, you would expect the samples to be strange. They were not. And the believers have an answer, that the divers only sampled the surface, that the real craft is buried underneath. But you can see the problem. The moment your theory depends on the evidence being somewhere you cannot reach, it stops being evidence and starts being faith. The UFO theory is thrilling, but the rock in the lab does not back it up. Now, the Nazi device. It is clever, but it runs straight into the same wall plus a second one. First, the same material problem, because a wartime steel and concrete installation should leave behind steel and concrete, not granite and gneiss. Second, the records problem turned upside down. The Third Reich documented its programs obsessively, and Allied intelligence spent decades after the war hunting down every secret weapons project the Nazis ever attempted. The idea that a structure this enormous was built, deployed, and then so perfectly scrubbed from history that not one surviving document or interrogation ever mentioned it is a very heavy lift. Possible, but heavy. The pre-Ice Age civilization theory is the most romantic, and it dies on one simple fact: there are no artifacts. When you find the ruins of a real lost civilization, you find their stuff. Tools, pottery, carvings, bones, the debris of people having lived there. The anomaly is just the formation, sitting alone on the seabed, with nothing around it to suggest anyone ever lived, worked, or worshipped there. A temple with no village, no road, no broken pottery, no trace of the hands that supposedly built it, is a very lonely temple. The absence of a single human artifact guts this theory. The portal theory, I am afraid, barely qualifies as a theory at all. It rests entirely on the electronics failure, and it offers nothing testable, nothing you could ever confirm or deny. It explains a mystery by inventing a bigger mystery. We can set it aside with respect and move on, which leaves us with the scientific consensus, the glacial formation. And here is the part the skeptics do not love to dwell on. Even the boring answer has loose threads it cannot quite tie off. Yes, granite fractures in straight lines, but does it routinely fracture into a clean 60-meter disk with a long straight track running up to it? Yes, glaciers drag debris, but the diver's own description of smooth, concrete-like surfaces and a possible egg-shaped opening is not what a random rock pile usually looks like. And the glacial theory has almost nothing to say about the one detail that started this whole thing, the electronics. A pile of granite, however oddly shaped, does not kill a satellite phone the instant you float above it and then politely give it back when you move away. The mainstream answer explains the shape reasonably well. It explains the dead equipment hardly at all. So look at where we have landed. Every theory has a hole in it. The UFO has no alien material. The Nazi device has no record and no steel. The lost civilization has no artifacts. The portal has no evidence. And the glacial formation, the supposedly safe answer, cannot explain the track or the electronics. Each theory perishes on the altar of some inconvenient fact, which is exactly the situation Peter Lindberg found himself in, year after year, holding the one piece of the puzzle he had never been willing to say out loud. And it is finally time to hear it. Here is what you came for. Here is what the world-renowned sea explorer who found this thing finally put into words, after more than a decade of biting his tongue. For years, Peter Lindberg played it safe in public. Whenever a reporter pushed him, he gave the careful answer. I don't want to say it's this. I don't want to say it's that. He let the scientists call it rocks, and he let the internet call it a spaceship, and he stood in the middle and refused to plant a flag. And the reason was simple, and it is the detail he kept to himself. He was afraid, not of the object. He was afraid of what saying the truth out loud would do to a 30-year reputation built on being the reliable, sober salvage man, the one who finds real shipwrecks and recovers real cargo and does not chase little green men. The moment he said the word, he knew the scientists would bury him. So what is the truth he finally landed on? It is not, as it turns out, a clean, it's aliens. It is something more careful, and somehow more unsettling than that. Lindberg's position, the one he and Dennis Osberg eventually stood behind, is this. Whatever else it is not natural. He has said plainly that in all his years of diving and salvage, he has never encountered anything like it, and that the explanation handed down by the geologists simply does not account for what his divers saw and measured with their own hands and instruments. The track that runs up to it, the way every piece of electronics died on approach and revived on retreat, the straight lines and the right angles and the smooth worked surfaces that a low-resolution sonar scan was never going to invent on its own. And here is the reveal that ties the whole thing together, the thing that makes the missing historical records suddenly click into place. Remember how we kept hitting that wall? How there is not one word about this object anywhere in the recorded history of one of the most documented seas on Earth? There is only one clean way to explain a total absence of records. It is not that the records were lost. It is not that they were destroyed. It is that there was never a human record to begin with, because no human being put it there. Whatever is hiding beneath the Baltic Sea was not built by the Vikings, or the Germans, or a drowned civilization with no other trace. It predates our paperwork because it was never ours to document. Something arrived in those waters, came to rest at the bottom, left its mark in the seabed and its fingerprint in every dead instrument that has ever drifted over it, and then waited in the cold and the dark for 9,000 years until a couple of treasure hunters, looking for old wine, dragged a sonar across it by accident. That is what Lindberg believes is down there. Not a rock, not a glacial accident, an object that does not belong to our history because it does not come from it. He stops short of carving the word alien into stone because he is a careful man and the lab only ever handed him granite. But strip away the caution, and listen to what he is actually saying. He is saying that the safe, scientific story is the one thing he is certain is wrong. He is saying that after a lifetime spent reading the floor of the ocean, this is the one place that reads like nothing nature ever wrote, and he is saying it knowing exactly what it costs him to say it. The skeptics will tell you it is a pile of Ice Age rubble, and they may be right, and you are completely free to side with them. But understand what siding with them requires. It requires you to explain away a 60-meter disk, a 300-meter landing track, dead electronics, scorched stones at the bottom of an oxygen-starved sea, and the total silence of recorded history, all as coincidence, all at once, in one spot. The man who actually went there, the man who has dived more wrecks than almost anyone alive, looked at all of that and decided the coincidence was the harder thing to believe. So that is the answer to the question in the title. That is what the world-renowned sea explorer finally revealed. Not a confirmed spaceship, but something arguably stranger, a veteran of the deep telling the world on the record at last that there is an object beneath the Baltic Sea that should not be there, that he cannot explain, and that he no longer believes nature made. You have seen the disk, you have seen the track, you have walked through every theory and watched them fall, one by one. And you have heard, finally, what the man who found it thinks is hiding down there in the dark. The only question left is the one he had to answer for himself. And now, it is your turn. Do you trust the lab report, or do you trust the diver? I know which one I keep thinking about.